right, here we go. We got some Antarctica.
It's cold, Basil. It's cold. Antarctica, go burn. It's a snowstorm. Antarctica. Ice scientists are penguins. Antarctica, they're opening the abyss.
Oh, yeah. And, one thing that I've noticed collecting stories about Antarctica in the last, I guess, a year, maybe more recently, too. And it takes a little bit of time. This is something I think people should recognize, too, is when you start more consistently looking at news in the sort of analytical way that we approach here, you start to notice trends. It takes a little bit of time to get there, though, because, you got to live through a couple cycles. You got to live through some time and absorb this stuff to really get it. But we've for us, we see all the Antarctica stories that come in. At least we try to sift through most of them. And in the last year, we've started to see a lot of the woke stuff happening there and a lot of the climate change stuff, which was always sort of there. But there are a couple stories that keep popping up and they get recycled. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about the cycle. Because sort of like how I think this came from No Agenda, and certainly it's something that we've noticed as well, is that the FBI will be in the news about every 6 weeks. I think that's changed now. I think a few years ago, it was every 6 weeks. They would have some story in the news about how the FBI are taking down a terrorist cell or some terrorist attack was prevented because the FBI is doing their job. It was every 6 weeks because they have to keep, public confidence up in an organization like the FBI, which is, tax funded. So it makes sense that they would provide good PR there. Similarly, if you're looking at Antarctica, there are trends that pop up. The plastics being, the microplastics being found in Antarctica was a thing we covered months ago. And I noticed that was starting to resurface. And what's interesting to watch is that 6 months ago, or 8 months ago, or whatever, when some of those stories were out there, it was more sort of on the fringes. It was blogs. It was, maybe some official local outlet or something like that. It wasn't the big news outlets. But now we're seeing this particular story about the Doomsday Glacier, which we reported on, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago, the Doomsday Glacier, it's melting and melting. But then on the other side of it, the peripheral news of, there's a vast underworld or under ice world with creatures and, all this land and stuff. And, they're going back and forth. It's like, it's melting, but also, and the other part of it was that, you're not going to hear in the news too often is there's all this new ice being created down there, right? Like, some parts are melting, but if you're just looking at what's melting, we're doomed. But then you look at what's actually being formed, like the new ice that's being made, and you're like, okay, well, sounds about right. You take one thing off the shelf, you put on another, it's about even. But we are led to believe that, no, it's the end of the world. And this Doomsday Glacier topic has really, really hit the mainstream circuit. And I don't even think it's important to read the stories. Maybe we can, just to get an idea of one of these. But this one here is from Yahoo News, mirroring the independent.co.uk. And the headline is Antarctica's Doomsday Glacier shedding ice at fastest rate in 5,000 years. Scary, scary. And then you have Mashable, another pretty mainstream outlet. Headline, Antarctica's Doomsday Glacier is losing ice at a fast rate, research claims. And then the subtext here, haha, we've started calling glaciers Doomsday. Yeah, funny. And then space.com. By the way, this is all happening on the same day. Or same 2 days, June 16th and June 17th, which is today. Space.com, Antarctica's Doomsday Glacier is hemorrhaging ice faster than in the past 5,500 years. So with three mainstream outlets, Space.com says Doomsday Glacier is hemorrhaging. Mashable says Doomsday Glacier is losing ice. And Yahoo is mirroring independent.co.uk. The Doomsday Glacier is shedding ice. Now, if this is not an example of the memo going out and then each outlet sort of tinkering with words here or there just to make it different. And yeah, Will to Box is laughing at the hemorrhage. It's almost like Space.com was like, oh yeah, the Doomsday Glacier, they're shedding ice. Well, no, you can't use that because indie.co.uk and Yahoo already used it. Oh, okay, well, they're not shedding ice, then they're losing ice. No, we can't use that either because Mashable already used it. Okay, well, they're hemorrhaging ice. Yeah, no one's gone with that, so let's go with that one, Space.com. Hemorrhaging ice. Well done. All right, let's read that one because it's fun. Antarctica's so-called Doomsday Glacier is losing ice at its fastest rate in 5,500 years, raising concerns about the ice sheet's future and the possibility of catastrophic sea level rise caused by the frozen continent's melted ice. The findings come from a study of prehistoric sea deposits found on the shores surrounding the Doomsday Thwaites Glacier and the neighboring Pine Island Glacier, both located on the West Antarctic ice sheet. The chilling news, Antarctica's glacial melt driven by climate change. Once again, we have continued to point out that scientists say that a lot of this melting is not caused by climate change. In fact, if my memory serves me right, the original Doomsday Glacier story quote, and I don't think it was a major outlet. Again, it was like a local outlet, or it was one of these smaller, I don't know, more indie outlets or something. But they quoted a scientist who said this is not climate change. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was about the Doomsday Glacier. It could have been about something else. Maybe it was about, I don't think it was about the microplastics, but because that was something else. But if I'm not mistaken, it had something to do with this. And so for the talking point to be climate change affecting, melting glaciers in Antarctica, especially the Doomsday Glacier, categorically false, but, they're going to go with it every time. Antarctica's glacial melt driven by climate change is advancing faster than ever before in recorded history. Researchers have reported June 9th in the journal Nature Geoscience. And again, let me just point out the ability to be obscure, the what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. It's not just a lack of transparency. It's kind of like a misdirection. It's obscurity. The obscurity of saying driven by climate change, because it's a little bit subjective, isn't it? If you talk about what's driving something, unless you're talking about somebody driving a car, this is more like motivated. This is motivated by climate change. Maybe, I don't know. It's just something I noticed. Maybe I'm picking too deep there. Quote, these currently elevated rates of ice melting may signal that those vital arteries from the heart of the West Antarctic ice sheet have been ruptured, leading to accelerating flow into the ocean that is potentially disastrous for future global sea level in the warming world. Co-author Dylan Rood, an earth scientist at Imperial College London, said in a statement. Quote, it is too late to stop the bleeding, Rood said. Asked. Sorry, it's a question. Is it too late to stop the bleeding? Rood asked. As one of Antarctica's fastest melting glaciers, Thwaites has earned the nickname Doomsday Glacier since the 1980s. Thwaites has lost an estimated 595 billion tons of ice, contributing to a 4% rise in global sea levels. Thwaites and its northern neighbor, the Pine Island Glacier, cover enormous expanses, has a surface area of about 74,130 square miles, and Pine Island 62,660 square miles. And it's, it's your typical sort of peddling of the thing with the shores and the world's going to change and we better do something, give politicians more money and attention because they are the only people that can save us from this, right? So that's it. That's all we really had for Antarctica, is just pointing out the narrative of the Doomsday Glacier being picked up by all the mainstream news outlets. And it's because of the clickbait nature of the phrase Doomsday Glacier, similar to, what was it? Forever. Oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on what it was. forever chemicals in the water. Yeah. So, this is great for the show because, all our subtitles can be straightforward. Like today's subtitles are microchip joke, forever chemicals, Doomsday Glacier. It's just nice package. But yeah, I think this attention to Antarctica in this context is of continued use for the elite for whatever they're planning to do down there or whatever they have planned or have built already. It's certainly part of indoctrinating the public into accepting something. We don't quite know yet, but I think it has something to do with the aliens, or at least the quote unquote aliens, and some kind of revealing there, especially because, Antarctica, they're constantly talking about how there's all kinds of meteors buried underneath the ice. And, what did we have last few weeks? It was, we might release a super bacteria from an alien rock if we're not careful with global warming. All the ice will melt and all the alien bacteria will awaken, kind of like Nimrod or something. And, the apocalypse will begin. But yeah, it's not the worst thing in the world. That just means that Jesus is coming back soon. And until then, we might suffer a little bit. That's part of it. It's the tribulation period there. And some people say that, God's people wouldn't go through the tribulation. And I'd say, well, maybe we're not going to be part of God's wrath, but certainly it appears that Satan has a temper tantrum towards the end, and especially against those who believe in Jesus Christ. And it'll be a dark time for the church or for the believers in that period, much like the first century church experienced. There's nothing new under the sun. So I think it's important to remember that the persecution of the church, of faithful followers of Christ, has been a thing since Christ came and ascended. It's never not been there in one way, shape, or form. But the eschatology around it being, it's going to be worldwide, that there will be a clear line drawn in the sand. If you don't take this mark, you will be killed. Can't buy or, it's not just you can't buy or sell. It's you will be killed. If you don't worship the image, if you don't take the mark, you're done. And, Revelation 13 talks about if you die by the sword, or live by the sword, die by the sword. But then also if you get taken into captivity, that's Revelation 13. If you get taken into captivity, then to captivity you will go. And certainly there are some who endure, but it won't be a time of cowering, that's for sure. And, it'll be a difficult and challenge phase of history, but again, it'll be the end of at least the way things are now. We're eagerly awaiting the restoration of creation.